Now, we have Dr. Davina Lloyd back in the studio. Dr. Davina Lloyd is back to 60 and CEDAW in Law's special envoy, who actually attended the UN CEDAW committee in Geneva to represent the case for all 1950s women. Now, just to reiterate, CEDAW stands for the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Hi, Davina.
Oh, hello, Hayley.
Hello.
And thank you so much for letting us use your programme this evening. And thank you to you and to Ian for all your continuing support for women out there.
Of course.
And I have to say how good it was to hear about all the developments in Wales from Jackie and all the work that Chris had mentioned. It all looks really positive, so I'm very upbeat at the moment.
Yes, me too, actually, me too. I think that's the way we have to be. You know, we just have to be like this. Now, it's always wonderful having you on the show. I enjoy our chats. And can you remind us, firstly, of your role at the United Nations, please?
Yes, of course, Hayley. Now, as many of your listeners will already know, because I've been on before, I first went out to the United Nations in Geneva in 2018 as a special envoy to represent Back to 60 in their campaign for full restitution for 1950s women after the government had, as we've heard, without due or adequate notification, raised the pension age from 60 to 65 and then subsequently to 66. And these women, as has already been said, had a legitimate expectation that their pensions would come at the age of 60. I put this case to the CEDAW committee, and this is the group who examine all forms of discrimination against women in all countries across the world. And the committee was so concerned about what had happened in the UK that in their report to our government in March 2019, they put in their recommendations that our government should, and I'm going to quote this so that this is actually what they said, take effective measures to ensure that the increase in the state pension age from 60 to 66 does not have a discriminatory impact on women born in the 1950s. And of course, we all know that it has been discriminatory. And if they had bothered at the time to do the impact assessments that they were supposed to do, they would have found that out. And if they had taken notice of CEDAW in the first place, they wouldn't have done it. And I think, as Chris alluded to, they do not understand this equity idea. You cannot just say, oh, well, men and women now get their pension at exactly the same age, all is fair. No, it isn't, because at the time they did this, they did it, and they must have known that women's pensions pots were 1/5 of those of men's, so 20% of those of men's, and that they must have known that there was no way that women could get an equal pension pot to men till sometime in the 2040s. But how on earth is that equal? It's about outcomes, and Chris made that point very well, that you have to look at what the outcomes are. Now, what should have happened following all this is that our government should have been called back 4 years later. CEDAW committee examines governments on a 4-year basis and asks them to report on their progress against the recommendations. But as we all know, globally, we have a thing called COVID, and that upset everywhere, the committee's schedules, and everything was delayed. So our government was not called back in what would have been the spring of 23, and we're still awaiting a timetabled session. There would have been nothing to report from the Conservative government, as in the spring of 2023 they had done nothing. But we do have a new government now, so hopefully soon there will be something to report when they're called back.
I hope so. Can you update us on the current position, please?
Yes. We're hoping that this review is going to happen some stage soon. And it's not just us. There are lots of women's groups with issues that need to be dealt with in all sorts of areas. But in the meantime, because of all the delays and the failure of the previous government to come to mediation and address the issue, I have news, and I can confirm that CEDAW in law has made an inquiry submission to the CEDAW Committee in Geneva, containing reliable information on alleged grave and or systematic violations of rights enshrined in the CEDAW Convention by the UK state party, in accordance with Article 8 of the optional protocol to the CEDAW Convention. Now, that sounds very wordy, but basically, as has already been said, our government is not upholding women's rights. It's in breach of national and international law.
Yes.
And our rights are enshrined in that convention, the CEDAW Convention, that was signed in 1986 by Margaret Thatcher. And we've asked for there to be an investigation into this.
Yeah.
And as Chris has said, these principles should have been taken into account before they even implemented the pension change and before they took this £181 billion from us.
Absolutely, definitely.
I mean, George Osborne says, what a way to make a saving. He's boasted about saving all that money by not giving us our dues, the things that we rightly had expectations to.
Yes.
And this sort of protocol, optional protocol, has been used before because they used it in Northern Ireland over the issue about abortion and trying to get abortion rights back to the women in Northern Ireland. And it is a very successful protocol to use when it is seen that there are violations of women's rights.
Yeah.
And there has been with the pensions issue.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are the 1950s women's hopes and expectations with the new government? Because they didn't mention any form of recompense in the manifesto. And in fact, Rachel Reeves, the new Chancellor, actually ruled it out.
Yes, she did, didn't she? And yet I thought Chris dealt with this very well in the questions earlier on. Well, as you know, Hayley, the new Labour government has got a lot on its plate.
Yes.
And they have to be seen to be very careful with the money. But as Jackie alluded to, in the 2019 manifesto, they had a very carefully worked out plan. And this was done by John McDonnell, the former Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, fully costed. They knew, as Labour tries to do, fully costed, which set aside £58 billion. And the wording that is in quotes related to that is that this was set aside as, in quotes, a debt of honour to recompense 1950s women. And as the Right Honourable Dr. Jocelyn Scott, who I know you're having on soon as well, has said, this is discrimination. It's clear discrimination. And there's both a legal and a moral imperative to put things right. And what I feel is, let's just hope that Sir Keir Starmer is an honourable man and he will want to be on the right side of history.
I hope so.
Let's just hope so. I mean, he appears to want to do the right thing, and this is an opportunity for him to do so. And as we know, and as other people have said, there is enough money in the National Insurance Fund, which we have paid into throughout our working lives. There is enough money in there to sort this out.
Oh, yeah.
So it is a matter of the will, of actual political will to have it sorted out. So it's obviously early days, but our support amongst MPs continues to grow. And we, like the group that Jackie is working with, have already asked the new Secretary of State for the Department of Work and Pensions to come to mediation talks. That's Liz Kendall. And we know that the Labour Women's Group are very, very much pro having a fully implemented CEDAW, because it won't just protect the rights of us 1950s women, it protects all rights of all women at all stages of their lives. And it's a really good United Nations convention to have. So I think whatever is going to happen, there is no excuse regarding lack of funds. It's not an excuse. And you can't use it as an excuse to do not to do the right thing. And the quote that Ian put out on his tweet for this particular radio show this evening came from Baroness Brenda Hale, the former president of the Supreme Court. And what she said was, the fundamental principles of equal treatment cannot depend on how much money happens to be available in the public coffers at any one particular time. Mm-hmm. That argument would not avail a private employer, and it should not avail the state.
Absolutely.
And I think if we look at, where Labour want to go, isn't it good news that Wed Streeting has lost no time at all in asking to meet with the junior doctors to try to resolve their issues?
Yes.
Let's hope Liz Kendall will also want to come to the mediation talk, and the huge number of MPs supporting our cause will ensure that this Labour government does the right and honourable thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm going to have to, I don't want to wrap it up only because we've got a few minutes left, but I'm going to have to. But I do want to say, because that was a really strong note to end it on anyway, because, we never won anything, did we, being quiet? No, absolutely not. So we'll keep on making some noise. And I wanted to say, would you like to introduce your song and we will play it for you?
Thank you. Yes, I work with an amazing team of volunteers who, like the people that Jackie's been working with, have been doing this for many years, totally volunteers, totally unremunerated in any way. They are superwomen. And I want to play Superwoman by Alicia Keys.
Good choice.
It's about the sisterhood working together and remembering that we can. We're all superwomen. And dedicated to all the superwomen out there.
Thank you so much, Davina.